Understand the limits of your character. You should be trying to avoid situations that are almost always a clear loss. So if there's a situation where 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up losing it, should you be engaging in that situation at all? How did you get there? What were you doing at the time? What was your opponent doing at the time? So, lose condition. Simple way to think about this is basically it's the opposite of win condition. So you might be familiar with the term win condition. I think a very simple way to describe win condition is what you need to do or what you need to get in order to win a match. But now you flip the concept around, right? So rather than what makes you win, what makes you lose? And I, again, say that this is very important because this is often an important aspect of matchups that is overlooked. And it's often a cause of, I would say, maybe something like tilt, for example. So you've probably heard a lot of people complain about certain matchups. You might even complain about certain matchups, right? Ultimately, if it is bad, you want to understand why it's bad. And ultimately, you can't change what makes it bad, but you can understand this sort of lose condition and understand, most importantly, how to avoid it. Because if you avoid the lose condition, then the worst aspects of the matchup are taken out or reduced as much as possible. So when you're approaching matchups, the lose condition can vary quite a bit. Some characters are very good at juggling. Some characters have extremely explosive advantage states. Some characters have great edge guarding tools. Some characters have great neutral tools. The ones that will be specific to you, your character, is going to be something where it's a deficiency. So for example, really bad recovery or really bad landing. If you're a stubby character who can't hit very far, then that's obviously going to be a disadvantage in certain matchups too. So we'll start off with basically taking a look at ones where it's the opposing character that has these, I guess, very beneficial aspects. We're going to see how those interact with your character, with your own character. So again, some characters have horrible disadvantage states, and in that case, then something like a character being good at juggling or a character with great edge guarding tools is going to be pretty dang bad for your character. Once you've understood where this problem is, now you want to break it down into what your options are. What is it that you can do? Understand the limits of your character. Understand why does it cause so much trouble? Because if your goal is to win the matchup, then yeah, you should be trying to avoid situations that are almost always a clear loss. So if there's a situation where 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up losing it, should you be engaging in that situation at all? You can't change DK's recovery. You can try and make his recovery have more mix, for example, but ultimately if you get placed off stage against a character with fantastic edge guarding options, or you get sent to a position where there's literally no way you can recover, then you know what's done is done. What matters more at that point is how did you get there? What were you doing at the time? What was your opponent doing at the time? You could think about the stage positioning, or if it was an air-to-air interaction, if it was an anti-air interaction, ground to ground, right? Lots of different ways. And so there will be situations, for example, where maybe someone has, again, a bad disadvantage state off stage, and the situation that sent them there started from center stage. You can't just simplify it down to don't get hit in the corner, because even from center stage, I can still get sent off. So what is it that I need to be doing differently? Certain interactions will play out. It'll be a bit of a toss-up. You might not be sure whether or not it's actually going to work out in your favor. And so, if it doesn't work out, then it might have a really bad outcome. But regardless, if you now have the situation where it's either a toss-up or it's almost certainly a loss, how could you play safer so that you don't experience this situation that's leading to so much trouble? And that's more or less the main part of lose condition, but it's boiling it down to what are your character's weaknesses. If you can understand that portion, and if you can understand ways that you can try to avoid these interactions, then you can kind of level the playing field a little bit more. So that's kind of the idea of loss condition or lose condition. Any questions about that? The problem for you is that you don't know the answer to some situations. Yeah. And again, there's also only so much your character can do. There are some situations, again, where it's like a clear loss, where there is no real right answer. There's only picking an option and praying that it's the right one. And so at that point, the point of your analysis becomes, how do I avoid being there in the first place? What led to me being there? Or what areas do I benefit in? So if I'm playing in a particular interaction and, I don't know, let's say getting cornered is extremely bad in a particular matchup. If I have to be always putting pressure on to avoid being put put in the corner, then that is how I'm going to have to run it. I do like breaking it down like this. Most of the time you think about playing better or getting hit less, but actually looking at every side of the interaction helps a ton with understanding it. Yeah, you want to understand why the interaction happened the way it did. You guys would know that there's situations where two options will clash, and for some reason it can turn out one way or another way entirely. And we want to understand why one interaction might play out a certain way. Was it a certain spacing? Was it timing of the options? Maybe even something as seemingly unimportant as the percentages. Maybe someone went for a specific option simply because they were at a certain percent or they were at a certain position on the stage. And then being able to understand the alternatives to that situation. So if you were to more or less play out the same interaction but with a different option, would the results still be the same? I find this is a lot easier to sort of keep in mind if you have video evidence, so VODs, because you can replay an interaction over and over again. And so yeah, if there's particular sections where, you know, a matchup comes through and you're like, this is really bad, then again, there's only so much that you can do to deal with it. So you want to think about, how can I avoid at all costs being in that situation? Otherwise, that's the matchup that you're playing. And so if you're getting tilted over how the matchup naturally plays out, then it's kind of you weighing yourself down, because ultimately it's something you can't really change, because that's going to end up being just how certain characters interact, or maybe how certain play styles beat out a different type of play style. That's why some players will also just opt for matchups that they find a little more comfort in, or a matchup that's easier. At a local level, matchups don't really make that much of a difference, I'll be honest. There are degrees to which you can apply or abuse certain aspects of a matchup, but you can outplayer someone at a local level. Easier said than done, of course, but it's to just remind you that you don't have to give up all hope just because you're looking at a matchup and you think this really feels impossible. There's always more that you can do. I think once you get to like the very tippity top level, I think that becomes more of an issue, because those people are just super good at abusing the options, but there's lots of flaws at the local or even regional level. All right, cool. I think we can wrap up then.